Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Friday, February 21st, 9 a.m. Glad to be here with all of you this morning. We are going to get two bill introductions from our colleagues, H178 and H177. We have about 10 minutes on 178 and quite a few witnesses. And so Representative Booten, if you want to join us.
Right. So basically, I'm just going to tell you that this really belongs in Carol's.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Michael Booten, Berry City representative, and was also city councilor that signed on to our TIF originally. So I'm really not the subject matter expert on this. Miss Carol Dawes is, and what I would like to do is just pass it over to her for any type of questions, and if that's okay.
Wonderful, thank you. Hi, Carol. You have spent much time with this committee, and we're happy to see you again. Welcome to our new biennium here in Ways and Means.
Thank you.
I have heard a little bit about these two overpayments, and I think there's sort of talk about putting some of the language of this into other places, but why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, for the record, Carol Dawes. I'm the former Berry City Clerk and Treasurer, which is when you saw me, Pat, in the last years. I'm currently serving as the TIF administrator for the city of Berry. And yes, we've had similar requests in the past. And they did start as standalone bills and then get rolled into others. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if that happens again this time. In a nutshell, and I provided my testimony to you, so you should have the document in your files. In a nutshell, it came to light while the state auditor's office was conducting the TIF audit for the town of Milton that there is a miscalculation in the TIF increment and the amount of TIF funds to be going to the Ed Fund. It's a miscalculation in the NEMRIC Grand List module. This is the Grand List module that is used by every town in the state for consistency's sake with regards to transferring Grand List information between the Department of Taxes and the towns. And the miscalculation led to more money being transferred to the Ed funds than should have been. It's about $180,000 with regards to Milton, and that's included in this bill. And it's $437,000 and change for Berry City. And the details are included in the document that I sent you. In addition to the details I sent you, Berry City's most recent TIF audit, which was completed in 21, was amended by the state auditor's office and was resubmitted to the legislature in December of 24 to reflect the corrections. So you have this information not only from the state auditor's office, but also from me. The information has been confirmed with the Department of Taxes, with the Vermont Economic Progress Council, which oversees the TIF districts, and of course with the state auditor's office. So I'm happy to answer any questions. It's ridiculously complicated. So.
We have only had we've had tiny TIF 101 in here this year, but we have not had time to go deep into it. I will say that usually sort of the Berry TIF corrections tend to be Senator Cummings' responsibility in the grand scheme of legislative division of duties, and she tends to put them in miscellaneous tax when they come over to her. So likely we'll do that on this year, but
and I did send this information to her and Senate Finance also.
Wonderful, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Just one, Carol, thanks for being here. I'm wondering if the error in the entry into NEMRIC has been fixed going forward, so this won't happen again.
It hasn't, and the reason that it hasn't is that the NEMRIC module is on the way out. It is being replaced. The Vermont Department of Taxes and Property Valuation and Review have already built a new program that's called VT-PI, and I can't remember what the acronym is, but and they're in the process of transitioning from the NEMRIC module to VT-PI, and so there didn't seem to be interest in spending the time and money necessary to make the corrections in a software that is being phased out.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
you. No
I'm
Carol, very
happy.
nice to see you.
I'm happy to come back anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good to see you. Appreciate you. Take care.
Bye, all.
Thanks. Take care. Next up, we have H-177 with Representative Kleppner, if you want to join us.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank
Floor is
you.
yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members, for having me in. Thank you. For the record, Bram Kleppner from Burlington. And H-177, the next step in our very long transition, our 55-year transition, moving slowly from property value to income for funding education. I'm sure all of you heard, as did every other member of this body, as did the governor and the lieutenant governor and the treasurer in this campaign season, that people would like us to do something about their property taxes. And when I served on the Tax Structure Commission 5 years ago, before the pandemic, before supply chain disruptions and labor shortages and inflation and the big run-up in property taxes, we took testimony from Vermonters across the state, and the number one request was, please do something about my property taxes. And my sense is that when Vermonters asked us to do something about their property taxes, they didn't mean hold the increase to 5%. And they didn't mean lock in the 30% increase over the last few years. My sense is what they were asking us to do was to provide a meaningful cut in their property taxes. And, you know, at the moment, as you all are very aware, something like 65% of Vermont homeowners pay entirely or partially based on their income. And the Bipartisan Tax Structure Commission, after examining this very carefully, made the unanimous recommendation to the legislature to move ed funding entirely to an income base. And the reason for that is because in many ways it is just simply good tax policy. It will make Vermont's tax system more fair by more closely matching the tax with the ability to pay. It will make the tax system simpler. And somewhat counterintuitively, it will make the tax system more sustainable. One of the concerns people raise about doing this is the conventional wisdom that income is more volatile than property value. However, when we looked at the data in the Tax Structure Commission, and this was the 18 years from 2000 to 2018, which included the recession of 2001 and also the Great Recession of 2008 to 2011 or so. It turned out that income was actually less volatile than property value over those 18 years. And as some of you who worked on the income-based education funding committee from 2 years ago will recall, the analysis is difficult. JFO was unable to provide the analysis that I asked for entirely, but they had pieces of it. And there are complexities in terms of figuring out for each household. You know, you need to look at each home site value and the household income of that home across everybody, and you have to figure out a way to incorporate rental data with homeowner data. It's complicated. However, with a large number of caveats and assumptions on my part as a I'd say moderately talented but non-professional data analyst. It looks to me as though doing this, replacing this with the income brackets recommended by the study committee of 2 years ago, that something like 65 to 70% of Vermont schools would have a net tax cut between the drop in property taxes on one hand and the increase in the ed income on the other that everyone would be subject to. So 65 to 70% get a net tax cut, maybe 10%, it's roughly a wash, and 15, 20% of Vermonters would see a net tax increase. So this doesn't raise any new money. It's not a net tax increase for the whole state, but it does shift the burden mainly from lower income Vermonters to higher income Vermonters. And I happen to represent a district with more than its share of higher income Vermonters in Burlington. And as I think about presenting this to my constituents and saying, hey, a number of you are going to see a net tax increase, I would be willing to do that because this is good. This is good policy no matter what else we do. We can do this whether we make any other changes, whether we go to a foundation formula, whether we leave 103 school districts all doing their own budgets. It doesn't matter. This is good policy regardless. However, we are going to do other things. We are going to enact or at least initiate the work on meaningful educational reform. So, my message to my constituents is some of you will see a net tax decrease. Some of you will see a net tax increase. And for those of you who have a net tax increase, over time, as we do the other educational reforms over 5 to 7 years, as we move cost out of the system, that new education tax ideally might go down or stay level, but at least it will not go up at the speed that your property taxes have been going up in the past. There's the question of local control also comes up. If we do this, it does not, they are not inherently connected, which is to say, we can move to an income tax, but leave local votes on the budget and have the brackets adjusted per that local vote as property taxes are now.
How do you imagine that would work?
I imagine that it would work, more or less the way we currently calculate property yield and income yields. I think it would not require a huge difference to the way we do things now. I would also say on the subject of local control that to a meaningful extent on the subject of the school budget, we have over the last 55 years made a number of decisions to give up local control in return for fairness. We've worked a lot in terms of fairness for taxpayers, with Act 60 in terms of fairness for students. And it has left us in the slightly unfortunate situation that we have more of an illusion of local control than actual local control, which is to say, you go to town meeting, the school board presents a budget, the voters vote it down because it's too much. The school board revises it, brings it back, the voters vote it down again, they revise again, they bring it back, the voters approve it. It feels like local control. However, in the last cycle, something like 50% in 50% of the towns, the property tax rate went in the opposite direction from where the school budget went. Just to say the school budget went up and the property tax rate went down, or the school budget went down and the property tax rate went up. The cycle before that, it was something like 70%. So, at least on that indicator, we have more of the illusion of local control than we have local control. And I think as a state, both in our Constitution and in Supreme Court decisions, and, bring them chief among them. But we have to some extent decided that education is a state level issue and a state level responsibility. And I think it is also good policy to match if it's a state level responsibility, the funding should be managed at the state level and not at the amalgamation of 103 local decisions. And the last thing I would say is that I think that mismatch between state responsibility and local funding leads to some of the most painful and community rending discussions at town meeting as the school budget pits families with kids in the system against families without, and pits teachers against everyone and neighbor against neighbor. And I do imagine town meetings with the whole education piece removed, where the local community can make local decisions about the local budget for the local cops, firefighters, parks, and it reconnects the vote on the town budget with the effect on the voters. The accountability gets restored. If you vote for an 8% increase in the town budget, your property taxes are going to go up 8%. And that's that.
Is your proposal to do away with local control of budget? I'm a misunderstanding.
No, I would advocate for doing this, to having a state education level, but that is not in H177. Once H177 will, as I said, is good policy regardless of the other decisions we make around education. It is simply good policy. And that is why we recommended it unanimously 5 years ago before there was any talk of education. That it works at any level.
Thank you. Representative Meslin, I think you had your hand and then.
Sorry. Good morning, Graham.
Good morning, Jim.
Question that Ways and Means through quite a long period of time has grappled with regards to income-based tax. Is what do we do about the fact, depending on how the bill is actually structured? If we look around a meeting, town meeting, or even if it's Australian ballot, and we recognize that, let me back up. The one thing that we can say about property taxes is it's pretty visible. You can see real estate, you can see this is worth, this is that, da, da, da. With that sort of as background, or as a corollary or something, what do we do if we're there to vote on the local control part? And recognize, looking around the room, the gym or whatever it is, that these 5 people are likely to carry a huge percentage of the burden versus little people in town, little people, who will be paying proportionately less. And I recognize why that would be so. But I wonder how we reconcile as we are about to cast our vote. Recognizing that a few people in town who happen to be at least allegedly a lot of development are going to be carrying such a high burden of the net increase, excuse me, the net proceeds or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Those, in this case, those people will see a much larger increase in their income tax than the decrease they see in their property tax. And so I would say, yes, that will happen. And yes, that is, in my view, an improvement in fairness. And yes, also, those people will still, in many cases, be paying a smaller piece of their wealth than people of lower income. And, wealth is notoriously hard to manage or discern. So
I appreciate your answer, and I'm just sort of jumping in here, going on people, but it troubles in Vermont communities where we all know each other.
Yeah.
And treat each other fairly, we hope. To know that if people across the gym are gonna pay a huge increase, even if they have wealthy property or something like that. And other people are their skin in the game is going to be comparatively less. And I'm just just trying to reconcile that. I don't think we have an answer, but it.
Yeah, and, you know, I will,
Thank you. We're gonna move to Representative Parker
apologies.
and then and then Representative Feltus, mighty quick, and then we're gonna wrap because we have to go to the floor. So quick questions, quick answers, team.
Yeah, I will be mighty quick. The numbers that are in the bill, in terms of the actual percentages that you propose for the education tax, where do those come from? Because I
I
couldn't
can-
match those.
I can, yeah, no, I can answer that very quickly.
Yeah.
Those numbers are simple placeholders. They are the current Vermont personal income tax numbers because we didn't know everything else that was going to happen. We didn't feel we could estimate. You can't leave blanks. So council recommended we use the current numbers that are in statute and adjust those. I will say the numbers recommended by the commission that studied this a couple years ago were less than half of
That's right.
what's in the bill. And I will just say, I think council gave us bad advice. That was a mistake because it is causing consternation as people calculate their new tax bill. And, you know, we've at least written a comment in.
It is one of the very hardest things about introducing a bill like this. Is you can't leave X's.
Yes.
You need to pick a number, but it's also one of the reasons that I think sometimes it can help us save some legislative council trouble because we need to figure things out before things become bills, right? Representative Feltus.
My question is, I'm wondering if moving away from the property tax would disincentivize people for using current use land value tax or enrolling in the current use system.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And we are talking only about homesteads. So I think, you know, house and 2 acres, probably not much of that is in current use.
Okay, that clarifies for me.
Thank you so much, Representative Kleppner.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I hope we can do something finally. It's been many years and our voters will love us if we do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Portia.
That sounds.
Folks, we're back here at 10 o'clock.